This is GPVWC Radio, and you're listening to the Super League Show.
Hello everyone, and welcome to 2019 here for simnews.tv, and we are talking everything to do with GPVWC, specifically the WTF1 Superleague, which is back again and starting very, very soon, in fact in a week's time. You'll be able to catch everything on this channel. All the races have been live, but we're going to go through everything you need to know ahead of the season, what's changed, what's going on, all the teams that are coming up, what's happening and who's driving, what can you look forward to. An awful lot's happened in the off-season, so we shall crack on with that. I can't do that on my own, so we've got some lovely guests with us. Our mainstay for the Super League show, we've had Mr. Ben Willis with us.
Hello.
Hello, Ben. Obviously, the only surviving member of the original trio.
Somehow
made it into 2019, so congratulations to him. Obviously, I'm not Jake Sanson. Apologies. So I'm having to stand in again as a scrutineer. In the meantime, though, we have got somebody, you might not see quite as much on camera, which is kind of amazing. And look, he's very still. It's Will Ponissi.
Hello, everybody.
Director extraordinaire of GPVWC and now Nordstrom manager still, if we're counting that, and probably our most successful manager in the Super League ever.
For the time being. I hear there's a few pretenders to that title. Not that hopefully the title they will be with me for a while still. Wouldn't mind retaining it.
So we thought, who's better to bring along and put opinions across than yourself? We thought we'll get you on board, and you can show us actually what you do know about this league, and Super League, what you think's going to happen this year.
Absolutely, and opinions, I've got plenty, and I'm not afraid to express them.
As does everybody, of course. So 2019, key points going into this year, of course. In the manner that if you don't know about GPV at all and the Super League, it's a development system. It's the most realistic team series you can get in sim racing, using the R-Factor 2 platform, which is the most realistic sim you can probably get, arguably, but we won't get into that on this show. We won't go that long. But let's just assume that for now. But it's not just about the drivers in this. It is about all the teams and they develop the cars, they develop the engines, they do all this other stuff. But ultimately, it is very much down to, still we have drivers champions, we have teams champions. It's very basic in that way. It kind of follows Formula One in that respect. It's probably as close as you can get. There is a lot of change. If you followed us in 2019, welcome back. Nice to see you. We obviously did something right. And so we've got an awful lot of changes to you. There is a completely new mod, new car, big physics change in that respect. That's probably the biggest change most people have seen if you're in and around the league. We'll get onto that. The biggest change, I suppose, is probably the look as well, which people was a bit controversial last year and probably quite controversial this year. But I think people kind of got used to it a little bit. Big one for Will. No Nordstrom this year. Dun dun dun. I think, is that for the first time ever in Super League?
Definitely in modern Super League as we know it. Obviously, the predecessor of the team era made its debut in 2002. So there was already year 3 of GPWC.
2002, guys. You hear that? 2002. Some of the people watching would not have been born at that stage. The milkman would have not even had a glint in his eye yet. But Will was already running the championship team.
And I was already quite old by then, so it goes to show that I've had a few springs on my back.
We put up an old picture of it for you just to keep you happy. Of course, if you guys were watching last year, no Nordstrom means no Martex engine, the one of the 4 suppliers. So we had, each team has different, a bit like Formula One, you've got different engine suppliers. Some of them manufacture it, and others are customers. One of which was Martex, was pretty long-standing, really, and also is now gone. In that, we also welcomed a new engine manufacturer. This has all happened in the off-season. In this case, I will get this right at one stage. Reventon. Are we going with that, guys?
That sounds close enough, I think.
Reventon. Anyway, after 3 seasons, the bull has now finally been let out of its pen and been allowed to create engines, apparently. So that's produced by the Adonis engineering team, which we'll also come on to because that might not be what we call that team now. And then the calendar itself is actually down to 16 rounds this year, down from the 18. So if you thought the season was a little long last year, then this season is the one for you. If, on the other hand, you think, well, that's quite short, so I'm missing the 2 races, there's an awful lot of other series and bits and pieces going on on the league that you can have a look at as well, and maybe that will get your juices flowing further into the year. Anything else to add, guys, in the off-season? I think that's kind of the big key points for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's most of the key talking points. I mean, obviously, you mentioned the car. That is a huge change this year, especially the physics. A lot of drivers, let's say, not the biggest fan of the physics last year. I think it certainly created a big divide, especially down to this year. At least personally from my experience and from speaking to a few other drivers, it feels a bit more natural, a bit more how you'd expect, a hybrid engine car to drive. Plenty, a real challenge to drive at low speed. But I think that's sort of the biggest improvement this year is that car. It's going to be, really interesting to see how that works with the strategies. That's probably my biggest change.
We probably should point out there, thank you very much to the mod team and Chris Williamson for heading that up and producing the car year on year as they do. I know an awful lot of work and effort goes into that. Often very unpraised, potentially, sort of in the background. So, yes, as on behalf of Sim News, we're very thankful. And it has a halo this year as well.
Controversial.
Do you like the halo, Will? Have you seen many of the cars so far? I know the mod's not out quite yet. It might be by the time that we're showing this, but currently it's not actually out. There's a lot of testing liveries and stuff, but liking the look so far?
Yes, I do. I've seen a few of the cars. I've had a few sneak previews, and I've seen obviously some of the other series that have been announced already. And it is a different look, obviously, with the Halo. I understand it may not be to everybody's liking, but as in Formula One, probably we'll very quickly get used to it, and it is something that in the effort of replicating what real life, it is part of the way modern cars look, and we wanted to replicate it in the league as well. So welcome, and hopefully we'll see also some teams using it in a slightly creative way.
That'd be quite interesting to see. Yeah, actually, hadn't thought of that. Suddenly rewriting how to do our livery. I suppose the other big thing we should mention in the off-season for people that are not quite into the league, see bits and pieces on social media, maybe that sort of stuff, or maybe confused in the year going forwards, there's a whole new series, which we're not going to really cover massively in this, but just to keep you guys aware, because we've got the WTF1 Superleague that we're talking about here, the highest tier, the one that all the big guns race at, basically. And there is now a Superleague Lights, which is sort of like a slightly watered-down version of Super League. The car is very similar to start with, but there's slightly less to develop, a little bit shorter races, things like that going on. Do check it out if you want to get involved and want to know a bit more, but in case you get any confusion or where's this team, why is that team not mentioned, that's because there is 2 separate leagues. Think of it as F1 and GP2 if you really want to go with that route. Probably a bit closer than that, but to give you a principle for tiers. Yeah, just so you're not confused. We like to make it simple for people here. We are simple folk at heart, aren't we, really? So it's kind of that sort of thing factored in. We're going to go through all the teams because there's some changes and an awful lot of driver changes kicking around as well. Some of you will have seen bits of pieces of news. We're going to give our opinions as we go through. You may not like it. You may like it. Sound off in the comments. Come and say hello. We will have a read. I may even message you back on my screen. Showing a few weeks. Who knows? I'm quite known for that. So it's always exciting to get involved in the community. Head over if you like all the stuff you see on here, you can always head over to gpwc.com. You can also catch it on all the Discord. Get involved, just start chatting away to people. There's an awful lot of friendly people on there to help you get involved in the community in some way, even if it's not as an elite racer in this series. There's plenty of other options. Just ask Bren.
Wow.
Or Will Bellman or myself. We're not, none of us are, really that top-notch racer. Sorry, Ben, if that's a disservice to yourself. You're best of the 3, I would imagine.
I don't know. I think we're going to have, at some point, we need a race between us 3. It's got to happen.
It is a very low bar, to be honest.
It is, yeah, true. I think we did have one. We had a karting race a few years ago.
We did, yes. I think I came last out of all of that.
Who won that?
Let's have a sim racing rematch, then we'll...
It's one of the few times I could ever sit in a room and actually go, look, I won a karting race against these people. Like anyone else now.
You're also probably like about a 45 kilo slider. You do have an advantage. from that perspective. We are very big.
Tall. That's the problem. Okay. Anyway,
let's move on. I feel.
No, move on. See, Jake would never have done this. So, let's go through the lineups. We shall head in. We'll do alphabetical order, shall we? I think that's what we're doing. So we shall head with. Well, I'm going to have to sit out a little bit of this, but we're heading into ACR first. Our reigning champions, teams and drivers for the past 2 seasons now. Of course, makers of Valiant engines for the past 4 years. An awful lot going on there. Alex Siebel stays in the car, defend his title. Unlike last time when Rudy didn't stay in the car to defend his. Risto Capit, though, does make way. And someone that Will is very familiar with, the 2-time Super League champion of David Fiduk, moves over from Nordgen, the now defunct Nordgen, over into the ACR car number 14. That car 14 has made 3 world champions in the past 4 years. The other one to that, by the way, was David Fiduk. So but I think there's an awful lot. People do question this quite a bit, but maybe surprise some people. I'm not too sure. Obviously, it wasn't a surprise to me. But I'm going to have to kind of take a side step to this one, I think. Hand over to you guys on how you think the team's looking ahead of the season. I like to think we're doing a decent job, but hey, nobody really knows until race 1.
Yeah, I mean, ACR 4, and I think you'd be a fool to bet against them for the title again. You're just looking at the lineup, that's so strong. Alex Siebel, reigning champion, David Fiduk, 2-time champion. I can't wait to see the battle there. It'll be a really close battle. Hopefully we see a bit more of the David Fiduk of old from back his earlier time at Nordson, as opposed to see that version of David Fiduk. And I think if that does happen, then that's going to be a really good battle.
I think I agree. Obviously, the reigning champ has to enter the season as the favourites, because last time we've been watching Super League, they were winning races and they were ahead of everybody else. Obviously, that doesn't mean that we're discounting their opposition, but obviously they've got number 1 in the car, and they're expected to be at the front when the season starts. I think, as you said, the relationship between Siebel and Fiduk will be one of the talking points. You can't fault either of them for their incredible talent. They've shown it time and time again. But it'd be interesting to see the challenge that Fiduk can bring. Obviously, he's coming to a team in which Siebel has already been well established. Siebel has won the last championship, and so the team is behind him. But then again, Fiduk was hired and definitely has got the trust of Mike and everybody else in the team, because otherwise they wouldn't have brought him in. He's obviously won a lot in the past. He's won in every car he's ever been. So I think it'll be a very interesting subplot to the season to see whether the challenger can disrupt the way the Siebel has molded the team around him. I think I'm very, very intrigued by that. Even if that was the only story we had throughout the season, and I'm pretty sure it.
Yeah, I mean, the talk there was making it sound rather easy for us between teammates. I do not think that'll be the case. But I'd love it to be, of course. But I think this grid is probably the closest we've ever had, the most competitive we've ever had at GPV, and that's saying something because in the seasons we have had recently. So I'm under no illusions this is not going to be an easy season at all, and the drivers are in exactly the same position. I think we've sort of we're kind of lucky in a way that David became available. I mean, that it's very rare to have a driver of that caliber suddenly become available to drive within the same series, particularly that experience level. I think there's Brit to probably drive for the team full time, which is interesting. We've had odd ones, but like, as a full time, quite interesting for me. So I'm excited about the season. I'm going to keep swiftly move on. But thank you very much for the nice words, everybody. Blah blah blah. We shall move forward. So.
I mean, you cannot fault the drivers in that team.
Damn, man.
Of course.
Blow.
Okay. I know you're more used to delivering burns than receiving them, but
that's fine. My team still exists. Right, let's move on to Edge, who became the title challengers last year. They've been around a little bit now under the Walters name and now the Edge brand. Also expanding out into different areas as well from this league, so they're becoming much more well known as a brand as well, Edge Esports. So it's year 3 in Super League. Last year did take ACR all the way to the end, near enough. I think the big thing for me that they've managed to do is get to Burlap back in that car again. To me, last year, at the start of the year, I don't think it was quite either it was adjusting to the league or the car, or he had other things going on. I'm not quite sure. He wasn't at the Petter Burlap that we knew that he could be from elsewhere. But come the end of the year, he really was, and he was up there challenging, if not, beating the ACRs. So putting him in that car really does make a big difference to me. And then his partner kind of threw me a bit. We had covered it on the Sim News before that we thought it might actually have been Mohammed Patel. His name was on the car for one point. Whether or not that was originally the plan, that's changed, and that means the team's not very prepared, is a slight question mark to me. But the person that they have put in the car is a great driver as well, in that he's been partnered by Daniel Kiss, which is probably potentially new to people at GPV. If you're not sure of him, just a quick Google and other large sim racing organisations that we shall not name for licensing purposes, maybe. Over elsewhere, he is quite big in those things, and him and Petter have actually been working together in a separate series currently. So there is some partnership there, of course. And they have the Quasar engine at Edge. So whereas we had the Valiant, which we didn't actually mention at ACR, but they have the Quasar engine at Edge as well. And it does have a customer this year. Last year it had no customers at all, which is quite an expensive thing to happen. You'll know all about that. But this time they do actually have a customer in the form of Mad Cape. How are we thinking Edge are looking? Are they title challengers again, or able to do that?
Yeah, definitely title challengers again. I think that combination of Petter Burlak and Daniel Kiss, as you say, they've got previous experience elsewhere, own talent. As long as he can get used to the car quickly and hit the ground running, then really good battle for the whole year. I was interested and rather surprised to see that Yao Tyan had stepped down, but that did such.
Yes.
But
as far as I understand, he's obviously still part of the Edge team, but I think he's actually racing on other platforms and such,
okay.
At a high level. So, fantastic driver still, and great if they can just call on him, at a moment's notice if they need somebody to step in, something along those lines. You do need a good third driver. It's very rare that a team manages to get the whole season with just 2. But normally, Will would know the stats slightly better than me, but it's normally a team a season. Traditionally was not for a few years, but yeah, normally one team, maybe 2 tops, gets 2 drivers to the end. So you do need to go on that third driver. And yeah, it's interesting that he's seen that his if it was his choice or the team's choice to put him back down to that, I imagine it's his. And hopefully Kiss can get up to speed straight away. If he has the same problem that Burlap maybe had at the start of last year, that could, we're in what looks like a very tight grid. A few poor races can really make a big difference this year.
I think one point that you made about Jarl is that it provides Edge with the depth they need to really mount a challenge. Obviously, Petra is back. It won't have the same amount of getting used to that he had last season. He'd be able to hit the ground running straight from the first race, which is what perhaps at the start of last season. Obviously, they will have a new driver in Daniel Kiss, but with Petter and Jarl as well in the wings, I think he'll have the support that he needs to put the talent to use right from the start. Where I would be very interested to see how Edge performs is more on a general level, on a global level, because of all the commitments in other series. So obviously it's a team that is growing massively. It's a team that's getting a lot of exposure and is getting into a lot of high-level competitions. And whereas that is a massive positive, both for the team, it can be a problem if they don't manage this in the best way. There's always the risk of stretching themselves too thin. And we know that in a competition like the WTF1 Superleague, you need to have that kind of preparation and the kind of commitment to analyze, to work on the setup, to work on the development. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, they've got an extremely experienced manager in Andreas Wouters, and I'm sure that they will do a great job. But that will be the main risk for them at this stage in the.
I'd agree with that. I mean, it's interesting to me that I'm still slightly unsure. It's a great thing that they're doing so well elsewhere. That could, like you say, be slightly detrimental to here, maybe. That was the late call of Daniel Kiss intentional, or is it the fact that we haven't got anyone else Daniel Kiss is in? Don't quite know where that is. He hasn't been in the tests either, so there's that element, potentially slightly behind others. But on the same basis, he's not driven the league before, so he's a very cheap driver. Factors in slightly to the budgets and stuff that we have within the league behind the scenes can play a factor, particularly if they're, the engine manufacturer side of stuff is costing them maybe. Quite difficult to tell. Financials aren't public or anything like that, so would be quite interesting. But I think they've got to be up there as a challenger. I think we everyone agrees those two drivers would be some of the best on any grid on any given day. Third on the list and third last year. We have, I don't think we've had that before, have we really? But anyway, third on the list and third last year was Evolution. Their first year, so got to be a standout first season for the German team. And they took the first win as well in their first year. That became quite a thing this year in 2018. And a good amount of podiums as well. Dennis Jordan runs the team and the driver. I think he's one of the few on the grid that does that. And they've sort of kept the lineup that they had at the end of the year when it's Dennis Jordan and Janik Bock. Both of them drove sort of the second half of the year as a replacement for Tom Parker, where they did score an awful lot. In fact, they probably could have had more wins than one, actually, but I do remember a couple of races where they were on pole and things like that. So there was an awful lot. Okay, but it's whether or not now the question is, last year sort of third was probably best of the rest, if you wanted to call it that way. It was quite a two-horse battle towards the end. Can Evolution make that step into the top level and battle the ACRs and the edges of this world? Is what 2019 will be found out. Second year is always that difficult second album, they always say, don't they? It's always difficult to follow up on the first. Do we think we're quite there? I know there is a small question mark people are making about Bock, whether he's actually going to race or not, but as far as we're told, he is. He was announced, so
yeah.
Fair enough.
I would like to see if Yannick is driving, him and Dennis are two extremely fast drivers. They know how to win at the front. If they can carry that across a whole season, it's like that, all sorted. They've got Tom Parker back as a reserve. If all those three elements work together, Dark Horse. There is this question of contract yet. He hasn't turned up for any of the tests. Is he going to be driving? We don't know yet. In which case, that throws.
They were a surprise package last year, especially, and I think we all expect them to do really well. As Ben was saying, there's the question mark around the driver lineup, but Dennis Jordan is by now is a known quantity. He's going to be out there, especially as the car improves. Last year was a debutant car. Their development capabilities were limited by the amount of points. They didn't have any reserves to draw from. And this year, they will have a further step. Will they be able to be on the level of ACR or Edge? That's going to be very difficult for them. I wouldn't exclude it. I definitely see them taking more than one win. Yeah. And I'll see them in the mix for wins at most of the races, if not all of them. Whether that will be enough to mount a championship challenge is yet to be seen. Probably they won't have the same experience of fighting at that level as an ACR has, because they haven't done it year in, year out. And those marginal things over a still fairly long season can make the difference. But it will be an interesting story to watch, and definitely see them maturing into perhaps one of the packages to beat.
more of a building year than that case. But I think there's a good few surprises that can be sprung there. I always like it if a team does manage to keep a lineup from the end of one year into the next. That's always quite a nice little. It shows the team's sort of like togetherness at least as well, and they're not necessarily, they're focused on the league. I quite like that. So yeah, in that eye, of course. And they've they're not an engine manufacturer though, so they have picked the Valiant engine this year against my better knowledge. But there we go. We'll get into that, no doubt. Next up, another surprise package, I suppose. If only I'm not quite sure which one eclipsed which, really, but nonetheless, Epic. Epic Racing. They had a win straight off the bat. They actually we're coming into Australia where they won it last year. So I don't think we had a win on debut before. It's a bit mad, but anyway, it's fantastic. If not, it's very rare. Jeffrey Fournier does stay in that car, so I think, as they keep joking, he's there till death. I think they've signed him up till
lifetime contract, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's a rolling lifetime contract, and then his firstborn joins the team. But this time, what was a big surprise to me in the off season though is that it looked as though they effectively took over Eval. So Ryan Kilk, who was arguably their number one driver there, jumps over and partners Fournier with his team manager and partner and ex-now owner of Eval, Argo Tidere, also as his race engineer, as part of the management side of stuff. To me, that is Epic really building on last year. That's them seeing, what they were potentially missing. They had a problem with the second driver partway through the year anyway. And so it's actually building on that to make that title challenge, which they're obviously going to want to try and do from fourth last year and winning races. It's building that team forwards, and I think identifying that, Ryan Kilk had some very good performances last year. I think a couple of fourth places in, let's be honest, not a very good car in the Eval. It was underdeveloped. It'd be interesting to see what he does with a full team backing, I suppose, and how that works with Fournier, because it's somebody coming in from outside. Normally, Epic sort of stick to Epic drivers, as it were. Any thoughts on that, guys? Can they do it?
Yeah, it's almost a bit as an influx of Estonians turning up. I think in Fournier and Kilk, they've got a pair of consistent. Okay, they may not be competing for wins or podiums, race in, race out, but they will be there up at the top end of the points. And having that is brilliant for a team, especially in their so I wouldn't be surprised to see him again up at sort of the top midfield area in that constructors standings. And if they can do that, then I think that's a really.
Yeah, I think it's very well put. As Mike was saying, it is a building strategy that they've got by bringing in all this talent, both driving and engineering from Eval. Epic last year had a typical trajectory can have. It starts really strong, and obviously as the development points and perhaps even the funds start dwindling, they sort of took a step back, and being able to build on a very strong year without the limitations that the debut year can bring is what is going to allow them to take the next step. Will they be able to compete against the top three teams? Right now, as things stand, I think they'll just be right behind them. But then again, they've got a class act in Fournier. They got another talented driver in Kilk. Over time, the consistency is what allows you to be right there in the position to pick up the pieces if the big boys, mess up.
I mean, I'd make a slight counterpoint there. I wouldn't have necessarily said, to me, consistency. Probably there is more consistent lineups on the grid. There's definitely talent in this team. I can see them doing some very, very good results. But equally, they both have been prone to a few accidents in the past year. I think of the top teams, that might be what stops them being in the top battle for me, rather than the speed outright, because they could go out and win races, either of those drivers, to be fair.
But that's what you also build through experience, and
absolutely,
you've seen them. The young drivers, they've got limited experience, if you want, compared to some of the bigger names, and you would expect them to themselves take this next step as the team?
We shall see, I suppose. Let's see if they can. Big shoes to fill from last year in Australia, let's be honest. So that'll be exciting. Another team that sort of went a little bit under the radar last year, I suppose, to some degree, was Hawkeye. They've midfield team. This is a very long-running team. They've done 10 years. Well, this will be their 10th year in the Super League. Run by Rick Scott, very experienced manager. They've always sort of been there or thereabouts, thinking of challenging for top points, but they're sort of consistently scoring points across the whole season. Sort of got them into the upper third of the group grid. They do manage to keep an unchanged lineup from last year, though. At the end of last year, so they kept Ricardo Costa and Leon De Wol. I insert joke here about if he finishes the season there.
He'll move halfway.
The pay, it's all right, ongoing joke, but nonetheless, between them, if they do stay there the whole season, both those drivers do have the talent to win races. The team, Hawkeye and Rick, should be able to produce, and they produce their own engines. They've been around the season, they've been around the league long enough to know what they're doing producing cars. Costa took a little bit of time, I think, to adapt to the league slightly. He seems to have got there. Liam, still very young, so still makes a few errors, but can't hold his pace. Can they move up from here? It's difficult when you get into the top end of the grid here. They've been beaten last year by two brand new teams. That will hurt. Can they jump back ahead of them?
I think it'll be really interesting to see if they do, and I think that sort of battle fourth onwards. Deval and Costa have extremely good pace and talent there. You look at the start of last season in Australia, battling Jeffrey Ford, absolutely amazing driving from both. I don't think you'll see them challenging regularly for podiums. I think they'll be there for the odd one, maybe. They're going to be, again, in that sort of top range of the points. And then again, if they can do that, then the upper places in the teams. And I think that'll be not necessarily what Hawkeye want. They've always been around there, but I think that'll be a realistic expectation.
The beautiful thing with Hawkeye is that he's one of the proper independent teams that for so long have been the backbone of the Super League. They are pretty much doing their own thing. They've nurtured the talent, and they went out to find talent as well, like Ricardo Costa. And they're still, they're definitely punching above their weight when compared to some of the larger teams that we have in this championship. You look at the organizations that the championships, and compared to them, Hawkeye is a very much of almost a family team, like we used to have, and to achieve what they're managing to achieve is still incredible, and they've got a talented lineup. As Ben was saying, it's probably not enough as they are at the moment to challenge for wins and podiums on a regular basis. But they should have the measure of some of the other teams in the midfield. And I would probably put my money on them to be ahead of this particular.
It's understandable. Why not? I quite like that. You're sort of akinning them to sort of a Williams-esque style of management. Is that sort of the route we're looking at?
Yeah, I think they'll turn up on time though to test it. And sorry for all my friends at Williams.
Damn. For all you Williams fans out there, Will's email will be on the bottom. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
No, you're not. So I think Hawkeye, is sort of taking a sort of traditional place at the moment. Sort of like you said, they've got some talent to nurture there, and it could spring the odd surprise. Likewise, though, we've got another team that's also in its 10th year now in the Super League, and that's Red Archer. They've been around quite a while, but they have had a team's title in 2011. Let's not forget that. It was many moons ago, but nonetheless, it was there. You cannot take that from them. It was a very good win as well. But unfortunately, they're quite away from that recently. A solid midfield team, but sort of it's very close in that midfield. You can end up 5th or you can end up 10th. It's very, very close. But unfortunately, the last few years, they have sort of been known for hiring the most drivers across the year. I think they hit 13 at one point and things like that. So there's quite a lot of drivers in an 18 race championship. That said, I think from a technical knowledge standpoint, the ownership is second to none. I think they've got the best owner on the grid from a technical point of view, and he does always find drivers to fill that car. Arguably, the quality and level and something's not keeping them all there, but it's a team for me that is at some point this team will come good and will surprise everybody at some stage. It's just what that lineup will be to fulfill the prophecy, as it were, of Red Archer. The new pairing they're putting in this time, though, it's a brand new lineup. There has been a couple of races, but not like this. So we've got Matthias Moos, I want to say. Moos? We're going to go with that spelling, that saying. And then Fabio Sixter as well, who did a few races last year, has returned for full year this year. There's always a little bit of an unknown element with these sort of guys, and I quite like that sort of thing. Sixter we are aware of and has shown talent. Speed, we should say. He actually came from the Academy Series, did a race there and blitzed everybody in that to get the drive at Red Archer. So did very well. I'm sort of like, jury's out on this one at the moment, I think. Odds are saying they probably will end up mid-pack, but they could end up higher, they could end up a lot lower. It's a big guess that, we do. To me, I think the biggest thing for them is if they can get these two drivers to the end of the year, that's like a win to me for that team. That would give them a base to really move forwards for and look. They're in it for the long haul, let's be honest. This is year 10, so they're looking at the year after and stuff as well. So for me, that's what I think. They'll probably know this sort of area in the table.
I think, as you say, the managing side of Red Archer is second to none, and someday that will come good. It's about nailing down that drive consistency. So if we can get the two drivers to the brilliant, I think that's a win in my book. And as you say, Fabio Sixter has shown some, good speed elsewhere, especially in the Academy Series. Whether he can translate that to the Super League car is another question. And again, we don't know much. That's going to be an interesting storyline to see to the pack. Where are they? It makes it a hard one to judge, really. Too soon to call as to where Red Archer.
I think, and it's quite scary. I find myself agreeing. But yeah, I think Red Archer, Ben, in terms of management, Nikos Evangelidakis is somebody who knows the ins and outs of the competition as probably better than anybody. He knows the development system. He knows the finances. He knows what it takes to succeed. And obviously, they have won a championship. But when they did, they had a solid lineup. A solid lineup that pretty much didn't change all season except for the odd occasion, probably when a driver was away or unavailable. But it was a solid lineup. It was able to develop the car to their liking throughout the season. It was able to learn and get the momentum going until they were unstoppable for the year. And that is what has been lacking so far since that year. Consistency and stability. They may sound like a cliche, but in a competition like the Super League, they're extremely important. And this team it is time for them to find a lineup they can build on, a lineup they can trust, and a lineup they can make the best out of what is consistently a good car. If they do that, they can have a chance. Perhaps not this year to be at the very front, but they can be. Surely being ahead of the midfield battle would be the achievement this team should aim for, because they've got everything on paper. But whether they can achieve it or not, the season driver-wise unravels after.
I think we're all going to sort of watch and see on this one, aren't we, really, with Red Archer? It's always nice to see new faces on the grid, and that's what kind of makes it exciting. We can't really guess what's going to happen there. Talking new face on the grid, last year we had one of the new teams that we had on the grid last year as well was Flag to Flag. Now, this team was known elsewhere and quite controversially put into this series, but we've covered that. I think probably proved their worth. That slap bang in the middle of the standings last year. Consistent, if consistent, not particularly crazily impressive, but most times we'd have gone a new team hitting 7th. Great work, really well done. It's only the fact we had 2 new teams right at the top end, running 3rd and 4th, that like you suddenly go, did they do that well? Actually, as a new team, that's pretty good, really, getting 7th. It's one of those where there is still concerns about it. I mean, most of the points came from one driver. That driver's not here this year. So what they have managed to do, though, is retain the services of Michael Ayres and joined him with Sergi Harras. We have seen Sergi in the league 2016, I want to say. 17, maybe.
17, I think, for Adonis.
17 at Adonis?
Yes.
Yeah. So he did drive a couple of times. Was sort of, at that time, sort of middle of top 10, somewhere around there, 6th, 7th. Had a few accidents and things, but generally showed his pace, and he has driven for the flag-to-flag team elsewhere, so knows the team. The biggest question, I mean, let's be honest, I've been quite critical of this team during the year, let's put it like that. Put it nicely in this particular show. It's an interesting decision-making process, I must say. There's definitely something, Michael Ayres must do something behind the scenes to flag that we don't see on track. Because he had pretty much the worst DNF record of anybody on the grid last year, and he still kept his seat. Yet Hutchinson, who scored all their points last year, isn't on the grid. So I'm not quite sure whether that's management choices, driver choices, what happened there. In my opinion, they will struggle to hit 7th this year. Again, just on the basis that we know so far. That said, very dedicated team, very active. Management know what they're doing now. So you can build upon that for a second year. Picked a very good engine this year. Little bits and pieces that obviously show they are trying and they know what they're doing. So they could surprise us like they did this year, but I worry for the team in 2019 slightly. More than I did last year.
Yeah, I hope they do surprise us. I agree. The re-signing of my interesting decision. Hopefully he can sort of prove the doubters wrong this year, less DNFs, and go for the points finishes. And that's good. Great for I would sort of help. And Sergi Harras, obviously, we've seen him before at Adonis, and he has some decent pace there, again, scoring points. If they can get both drivers scoring points, then I think it'll be another solid and consistent season, which I think is what, again, Flag needed. I alluded to earlier, that difficult second album. If they can do that, then success. And so.
Well, I personally think the Flag have got the chance to really make a step forward this year. Obviously, we've talked about the circumstances of their joining, but an often overlooked aspect is that by joining as they did, they didn't really get the chance to get to know the league and the way the league works and everything. And they had a very, very steep learning curve in year one. Now, we're looking at a decent team because of what they achieved in the first year, despite all these difficulties and this extra learning that they had to do. And now they're in a condition which they've passed the first year limitations in terms of budget, in terms of points. They've got the knowledge, and they can translate it. Obviously, you mentioned about the issues and situations with the drivers, but from a management point of view, they know what they're doing. They've shown it already, and now the possibilities.
We can only hope. Australia will find out, won't it, I suppose? So, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on this video. This isn't all of it, though. So I know you've got this far so far. This is halfway. You've seen the top half of the grid, all the excitable stuff that's going on there. Join us in the next show on part 2, which you'll be able to find on this channel. And we'll look at all the second half of the grid and all the new teams as well. And we, the three of us, will put our hearts on the line and making our own predictions of the actual championship table. So do not miss that. Make sure you're tuning in all the way through part 2. I shall see you on part 2.
The Super League show is part of the GPVWC Radio podcast channel and is produced by simnews.tv for Downforce Radio.